All right, well, welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. So I'm Justin Cappos. I'm a professor at NYU, creator of the Tough Project. And here with me is Howard. I'll let Howard introduce himself.
I'm Howard Huang. I'm principal engineer from the open source team in Huawei.
Great. And we're going to be going and giving a bit of a run through of what's going on in the newly formed security SIG, like the security working group for the CNCF. And I just want to say that, because we're talking about what a large group of people are doing, take anything we discuss here as the group as a collective, generally has this opinion or generally thinks this thing, and we'll try to make it, try to make it clear when we have our own opinions or what else is going on in this case. So first of all, what is this SIG security group? Well, of course, the big focus here is to protect cloud native ecosystems and also to really help people understand what tooling and what procedures and what things are available for them to use in cloud native to go and have a stronger, more secure cloud native ecosystem. There are also things around tooling for auditing and other mechanisms like that that are under the purview and are some of the things that I'm very quickly going to talk about here. By the way, do feel free to raise your hand and interrupt at any point if you have questions. We will intentionally be going through things here and leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So we've tried to, we want to make this interactive and make this more of a discussion than us trying to kill people by PowerPointing them to death. So as you may have seen if you came to the intro talk, the actually security working group is not that old. It has really started fairly recently. And really Dan Shaw, Sarah Allen, and JJ, which are the co-chairs of it, did a nice job of getting this together and getting this accepted and getting this formal part of the CNCF. And have been going through a lot of the bureaucracy here. So you can just see this is, I think, even a partial list of people that have been participatory here. So, and I know that some of these people in the room, if you're one of the people who's participated, please raise your hand for a sec. Okay. Well, there's at least one other. So thank you for participating. And there are a lot of different people that could have been asked to give this talk, but I drew this short straw, I guess. So anyway, so one of the big things that we're doing in this group is we're trying to do security assessments. And what a security assessment is and is not is kind of important here to talk about. The idea is to do a high-level security review of a project, not to try to look through the code for like SQL injections and buffer overflows and things like this, but to understand, are they trying, do they have goals that make sense? Are they trying to solve a problem that would make sense for users to want to adopt? Will it actually make security better? Is the way that they're going and developing their software, the general framework for this, does it make sense? Are they just like checking in private keys into their repo that they use in production or things like that accidentally? Also, is the project itself usable? Is it something that people can go and you pick it up and you plug it in, and the default way of plugging it in is actually going to give you meaningful security? Or are you in a situation where there are so many kind of rough edges and gotchas that you really have to worry about that? And there's a whole template for this. The whole process for the security assessment is something I did an initial request for, and a lot of other people, including Justin Cormack and Sarah Allen and others, helped to refine a bit. And the purpose of these is to provide guidance. And we provide guidance both to projects so that they understand how we perceive their security posture, the TOC, so the TOC can understand, is this project a risk in the cloud native ecosystem, or what areas of a project should be studied more, and also potential users so that you can understand, I'm going to plug this into my environment, or I'm thinking about plugging it in, what security things do I have to think about this? And this is not meant to subsume like a security audit that you would get from a company like Trail of Bits or Cure 53 or somebody like this. Because this is folks from the CNCF that are going and spending a week or so of their time to really look at and understand a project. And the idea is that independent detailed security audits at a code level are going to be done later, and that this documentation will help to inform those audits to help them understand what should be in scope, out of scope, so on. The way in which we've chosen projects for this and worked with different projects for this is the TOC has asked us to focus primarily on security software first. So we were given a list of projects. The list was Tough, Notary, Spiffy, Spire, OPA, and Falco on the list. And those are all security projects. Then the second priority from the TOC was projects that heavily influence the way you would have security. So something that you might plug into your infrastructure that would, if something goes wrong from a security standpoint, have undue impact in a negative way. After that, it's sort of everything else. And we have unofficially completed audits of Tough, Notary, Spiffy, and Spire. I actually worked with some folks on the Spiffy Spire team to do an audit, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago for them. There's a bunch of blog posts and other documentation available about this. And we actually used this as the way to come up with the initial procedures for how we would do the audits inside the SAFE working group. Tough Notary has had a whole bunch of audits, and a lot of them are available on the site for them, so you can actually go and read other audits by Cure 53 and I don't know, 3 or 4 other groups. And then we have been sort of going through the assessment process with a couple of different projects. Justin Cormack here is leading the assessment for the Intoto project, which is a project that is hoping to join the CNCF at the incubating level. It's a supply chain security project. And then OPA, I've been leading that assessment and working with the folks there to go through that process. And we have other projects that we've had conversations with, like Falco and Keycloak and others. If you are a contributor to a project that might be interested in being that third non-security project, then please let us know. We are looking for something else, and hopefully by the next KubeCon, we'll be able to present and talk about all the finalized things like this. Just to give you a sense of what it takes to do one of these, is it open here or did it not get open? The OPA. Okay, all right. So I can, sorry, because we switched laptops. You basically write up a document. Hey, Sarah. There's Sarah, one of the co-chairs in the back who just walked in. So what you do is you basically write up a document. It takes something like maybe 20 hours to write an initial assessment document, 20 to 30 hours. You iterate with the group that's doing the audit, and the whole process from your side, if you have already done some background and have some security assessment, is expected to take something like 1 to 2 man weeks of effort from your side to put this together, and the resulting documentation. Sorry? Engineer weeks. I apologize. Thank you. Thank you for correcting that. It's expected to take not an undue amount of time from you, and then the auditors themselves go through and get a deeper understanding of what it is you're doing, write up an assessment, and the documents, both the things that you write about your project and its security posture and the things that the assessors write about it are public documents that other people can look at and read and understand what the security posture of a project is and get a sense of that. So the purpose of all this is to help to have some information about when should you use a project? Like what security concerns should you have? What environment should you use it in? What benefits will you get from it? Where are the limitations? How best should you actually deploy it? Like you have this project, you hear it's great, you hear it does all these good things from a security standpoint, but there are definitely wrong ways to deploy pretty much anything. So you want to understand a bit about that. And also, it's often helpful to understand what other people have done. So you don't want to just, you want to learn from the fact that someone else deployed it in this way and they found these positives and these negatives with this So having sort of in the wild assessments can be helpful. And then overall, we're trying to also do things and understand things like what are the gaps in the cloud native like landscape. How can we improve security overall? Can we give recommendations for ways to do things? Do we need to, push to say, hey, there should be a cloud native project that secures this part because there's a big weakness here in everybody's workflow? And also for existing projects that you already use, how can we do things like how can we make Kubernetes more secure? How can we make Prometheus more secure? How can we make, whatever tooling you use work better? Right. So. And I'll just give you a rough rundown of the ones that we've been through. I want to say that this is just a very rough assessment and kind of one-liner about what you might think about it. So if you're trying to deliver your software in your container securely, which ideally you don't want people to tamper with your containers, so it should be everyone's goal, then using something like Tough and Notary. And the kind of one-line assessment I have for this, and I should say I have bias, perhaps because of this, because I'm the Tough creator, but it does have some one-time setup costs, but after that it's largely an invisible piece of security in your infrastructure. And that's basically the feedback that we get from our users who've adopted it. It's, yeah, it took us a week to integrate, but after that, it was great. And then when something bad happens, it's really nice to have it there. Spiffy and Spire handle the secure introduction, the secure provisioning of the initial identity. And it's a cross-platform, cross-cloud way of doing this that's very simple to use and integrate and fairly seamless. Also, if you're trying to manage policy, OPA is a great policy is a great project for that. And it does have some costs to kind of get up and going with OPA, but it lets you kind of collate and manage a lot of policy centrally. So if you're managing multiple policies in multiple different places inside your ecosystem, then it's potentially worth collating and centralizing that. And then in Toto, which is the last one that has like OPA has an in-progress assessment going on, which I'm also involved in, is a general verifiable system for provenance of your software supply chain. So it makes sure that everything from your Git to your build process to your CI/CD to anything in between, all the testing and everything else, that the software that you end up with is the software that your developers actually meant to build for you. Okay, and then a way to try to help make all this work is to help you find things and do things is we're currently creating like a landscape for security here. And there have been some proposals about ways to do categories, a different approach to do this. And we're having a fair amount of discussion about what the right way is and what the most useful way is. So if you're looking for a way to contribute, it's actually a pretty good time to jump in to some of that discussion and help us shape the most useful thing possible so that you and other people can come along and quickly find what they're looking for. There are other things we're trying to do under the Security SIG group. One of them is we want to provide expertise out to different projects. There are a fair number of situations that come up quite rarely for different organizations. But one of the things that, at least in my role as a professor, I have kind of the leisure to do is I get to study a lot of incidents and really understand them. And I know a lot of people in the security group, professors are not, which really for everyone else is not. It also, just because you enjoy doing these kinds of things, also spend a lot of time looking at this. So there are quite a few occasions where people will run into an issue, like some issue with the way they're using cryptography or time of check to time of use, race condition, or some other type of issue like that. And we've seen major companies with big security teams make really kind of boneheaded mistakes in trying to fix some of these issues that we want to be at least a resource that, hey, maybe just have a conversation with us about this. And there are cases where, the fact that we may have seen this 50 times before can sometimes help out. There are also things around documentation and tooling and things like this that we want to make better and want to improve in the ecosystem. Generally improving security awareness. We're working on a security white paper that's had quite a lot of effort. There's a lot of policy documentation, which Howard's going to talk about in a moment. And in general, another big part of what we're trying to do is to do outreach and get community feedback. So we'd love you all, if you're on Slack, to join SIG Security and to come to our meetings. Our meetings are Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, so you have to adjust that for whatever your time zone is. 10 a.m. Pacific. What's it? Justin Cormack in 6 p.m. UK, 7 p.m. here, so your time zone may vary. Okay, and yeah, for that, there's a link here, and you can also, if you want to learn more about the security reviews, Justin Cormack right here is going to be giving an in-depth talk about that at 2 o'clock today. But now I'd like to hand it over to Howard to talk a bit about policy. And like I said, we'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. But also feel free to interrupt at any time if there's any thoughts or any burning questions anybody have right now before I hand it over for a minute. All right, great.
Thank you. Hi, so I'm sort of the person leading the policy effort. So every time I open up for the Kubernetes policy working group session, I always say we are a small, passive, aggressively scheduled working group. But we believe that we are working on a, although niche, but really interesting area. So for policy, I think most people can confuse this with actual policies that government's making. It is not. Cloud native policy is something that we could actually code it out. And for most of you, I think if you are familiar with OPA, auditing and compliance is one of the biggest use case. But actually, the general cloud native policy goes way beyond just auditing and compliance. First of all, for security, policy is actually a way to help automate your security deployment. And I would really like to point out that policy is very different from configuration. I think people always confuses the two. Config is like part of the ways you actually enforce policy, but it's not like policy. And policy is a rare species that you can say is an abstraction on every level. It's like end-to-end abstraction. You can have very high-level abstraction policy expressions like what OPA, the Regal file, provides, or down very low to things like eBPF, or you have policy for your CPUs, GPUs, accelerators. So it's very interesting field. And also policy is something that help bring liveness to a cloud that, we help a human could actually talk to the cloud. So if one thing you can take away from this session, I want you to take this away. So policy is not config. Configuration is one way. Policy is a round trip. Policy expect result and provide like punishment or reward for that result. Okay, it's not. So policy.json is hardly policy. Okay. A little bit of history. I will quickly go over it. So we were working with the SAFE and now Security SIG very early on. This is a very old slide, actually. And motivation is actually, we see policies started with Kubernetes, scattered all around the place. You have multi-tenancy policies, networking policies, RBAC policies. And then if you look beyond Kubernetes, you see it still has a lot of policies. Many other like OPA, Spire, Notary, many cloud native softwares are using policies. And what's important to know here is that for the policy description itself, the language, we think is very domain specific in nature. So it will be very hard or difficult to standardize on the language level. We got many questions like, will we have a standard language, to describe policy? Personally, I don't think so. It might be in the future, but it would be a very difficult task. So we focus mostly on policy semantics and control mechanism. These things are universal. So no matter what language, like programming languages, no matter what you are using, the semantics are the same. You are expressing like who do what under what circumstances, in which manner, for what reward, right? This is basically a policy in a nutshell. So these are the overall architecture we are currently looking at. So I can see we can sort of put the cloud native world into these 3 layers. So we have the control plane, like the Kubernetes is still, and we have the data plane, Envoy, Cilium, and you have the policy layer that you have the policy engine, possibly have a formal verification engine to help validate the policy. And also the compiler here is not the usual compiler we always refer to in programming language. Compiler here is something that help compile your policy semantics to what the cloud control plane understands. So in the context of Kubernetes, the compilers are the CRD frameworks like the OPA Gatekeeper project. So those are like the compilers that help actually compile the policy into something the control plane could execute on. So, and this is some of like relationship what we do in the CNCF Security SIG side and Kubernetes. Okay. So the main thing we are doing in the Security SIG is now we are writing the white paper. So there are some of the like purpose and things we do. One of the things we do for the white paper is to doing case studies, which makes our meeting quite like a podcast. It's quite interesting. So I will quickly go over 4 highlighted case studies we did. The 2 are mostly Kubernetes related. I will cover in tomorrow's policy working group session. Okay. So Cilium is a great open source project. For Cilium, the gist of it is it can provide an ID or context-aware like RBAC system via the power of eBPF. So this is where the policy is very important in Cilium and interesting for us to see how policy could help Cilium. One of the takeaway from our case study session is that giving eBPF's own capability of extension, we think Cilium might go beyond the current scope and have more capability for policy that by using eBPF. SPIFFE Spire is like workload identification. So something came out the case study is that we are looking at maybe for the SPIFFE metadata field that we could like add something like trust domain or policy domain that actually help further identify the workloads like belonging so that you can apply more dynamically apply policies to the workload. Instead of right now we just have one field as long as I understand. So Tough Knowledge came from Justin's NYU team. Very interesting project. So we were very glad to see there are like we are always glad when there are more policy semantics. The support not only allow and deny. It's sort of boring now. So we see like for example in total has the concept of artifact rules and like layers of rules, and you can define actions like match or create, which is quite interesting. This means we can basically further extend the policy semantic. Istio, we have a really great talk from the Istio Security SIG or working group. So policy is still mostly used for security. So one of the things that they are planning for the like authorization project V2 in this year is that they are looking at also more complex semantic support other than just allow, deny, and also they are facing the problem of policy conflict resolution, like how you could have a set of rules for your different namespaces and tenant, and how you prioritize this deny rule can prioritize this allow rule or whatnot. Okay, the summary is that we are seeing actually more complex semantics coming out, and we believe that there will be more and more complex policy semantic other than allow, deny, that will be very useful in the cloud native field. Okay, there are some very interesting areas may cover tomorrow meeting. So one is formal verification. We did had a discussion with the AWS Automated Reasoning Group team. Very interesting discussion with Brian Cook. We probably this year will launch a sort of open source research project to see how to bring formal verification for Kubernetes policy, starting with Kubernetes, of course, to see that one, we can verify the policy itself, and second, we can ahead of time or just in time see the policy execution if it can be validated. The second one is from our co-lead Erica from Red Hat, the policy type system. So basically, you can treat policy as a type system for your cloud native architecture. This is also a very interesting topic. So you can have many policies actually like the integers, floating point that you're using in the programming language that putting constraints on your cluster. Another one is container policy interface, because most of the time we are doing webhooks, and maybe there's need for a REST-based like CSI, CNI. Okay, we have weekly meeting. So please, it's like 4 p.m. On the West Coast, I think. Also, you can ping us on either the CNCF Slack channel, SIG Security, or Kubernetes Slack workgroup policy. Yeah. So tomorrow we'll have another Kubernetes focused talk. You're more than welcome to join. Okay. Thank you. Now, questions.
Yeah, so we intentionally left quite a bit of time because we want this to be a discussion. Like, what should the security group be doing? What would you like to do as part of a security group effort? Anything in those sort of veins. Just somebody kick us off with some great suggestion. All right. Yes. Yes. So don't be careful about how we use the word audit. It's funny because during the intro session, I had exactly the same observation about the speaker there. It's kind of hard to do that. It is an audit, but it's not a code audit, and it is. So we called it assessment to try to disambiguate. So we'll try to be clearer about that. But thank you for the catch. Yes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yes. Yes, we are. We have 2 of them that are not complete, but the plan is to have them up in the repo linked, and also the projects are very likely to list them prominently, or at least I know the Intoto project will absolutely do that, as we did with TUF, and I'm sure other projects will want to as well. Yes. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I see. So that's a very good question. So let me repeat the question. So the question is there a consistent threat model and attack model that is being used across all cloud native, or is it individual in some ways to what a project is doing? And I think that that it is semi-individualized, but with the context of what, because each project, the role they're trying to play in the cloud native space and the environments they might be used in and the threat models from those environments can be quite different. So if you have something that's really meant to be used in highly available, high assurance environments, it's designed to be a storage layer for this, like a persistent storage layer or a database or something, you might consider unavailability, like denial of service style attacks, to be a much higher problem than one that's just meant to be like an ephemeral cache where you're allowed to have cache misses and your system needs to be able to fail and recover, even though they both sort of have storage and so on. So I think that over time, something that is a more solid set of ground rules may emerge. But to this point, with 2 partial assessments under our belt, we're not ready to lay big stakes in the ground. But I think that's a great observation, that we should be thinking of commonalities. And we're not trying to do these in a vacuum. There's a lot of interaction between the team, and we have overlapping teams for future audits and things like that. So, yes? Yes.
We'd like to go in a direction there where we can actually automate things off the back of those attack trees and essentially build kind of security acceptance tests for a given set of criteria. But we're quite wary about charging off down.
Yes.
So that's something we'd like to discuss.
Okay, so let me repeat the question just for the recording here. So the observation is that when you build attack trees and things like this, you're going and then you'd like to be able to tie this into more automated assessment and have tooling around this. And this work you're doing, you're somewhat leading the way here, and you'd like to make this available to others. I think that's excellent suggestion, and we'd absolutely love to have things like that. I think it falls very neatly under the tooling aspect of what the SIG security charter, like what we're supposed to be doing is collecting and getting excellent tooling like that, making that available to others. Because it's something that, it sounds compelling, like, hey, I'd like to use that in Tough and in Toto, and, based on what I've heard, would like to kick the tires, and I'm sure others would too. So the process for going and getting to get an assessment, or sorry, are you, go ahead and come on up, Sarah.
So our intent is to have the ideas about what we do work on very much come from the people in the group, because we have a lot of experts in the group. And so while we will do things that the TOC would like us to do, when they have a need, we created a governance process. So if you look in the governance folder of this repo, there's a process that describes, it's pretty simple. You make a GitHub issue and we talk about it, but it's written down exactly what you would have to do if you want us to work on something as a group. And so I would encourage you to follow that process, because I think you and like lots of people here have, what we're seeing is people in the field have these security issues that everybody, it's all DIY, right? It's all like, let me write some script to do this thing. And lots and lots of people have a need, which is why this group exists.
Right, and become us. Don't just create a PR and then say, gosh, like, why doesn't the security group do this? Like, join the security group, participate. That's basically what I did is, they were like, gosh, we need an assessment thing. And I'm like, well, I did an assessment for Spiffy Spire. And they're like, well, how did that go? And I wrote a bunch of things down as a guideline. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, now you're in the lead for security assessments or something like that. So it's fine. It's nice. So you get coasters as a speaker gift here and stuff like that. You get to go to events. So, all right, what other questions do we have? Yes. Okay, great. Yeah. So that's okay. So that's a great question that I'll try to repeat. You work in fintech. You did things in the threat modeling standpoint, and you're also doing things in the testing and verification standpoint. And you'd really kind of like someone to look at your environment and your holistic deployment of how you did things. I think that the general goal of what we want to achieve should make what you're doing. There should be good ways to provide things like what you're doing. I can think, I'm just speaking for myself here, but one way to do it would be for you to let us make you like a case study that we could put up on the site and have other people audit and look at it. That, I think, would be an effective way to get that kind of feedback you want. Sarah has...
So yeah, actually before we pulled you into activity in the group, what we did a lot in the first 6 to 9 months that we were in existence is we had the different projects that did security, some of them come in and present, as well as what we called use case presentations. So that was incredibly helpful in aligning the group. Basically, we decided that any time the people who created platforms disagreed on things, we would pause and ask for people to come present their use cases and talk about their pain points. And so like Cloud Foundry talked about how they integrated various things for identity, and a number of different companies came in and talked about exactly this type of thing. So I would love to have you talk about your use case. This is the security things we used, and then people can people can get inspired. Oh, I'm not doing that. I didn't read that paper, that 101 best practice that you read, or have recommendations.
Great. Yes. Okay, the question is, who's the audience for the security white paper? I'll let Sarah handle that.
That's actually one of the reasons we don't yet have a white paper, because we imagined that there were many different audiences. And now that we've, basically in the fall, we realized what the audience needs to be, which is the TOC needs to be able to, somebody is new to cloud, and says, I don't know about this cloud thing, or I'm in cloud and I don't know what I should be doing about security, and here's your white paper. So it's for people who are, they're not novice about security, they're not novice about cloud. They know the basics, but what is different about cloud security in a way that you would then know what areas you need to make decisions about, right? So it's for the decision makers.
And Howard, what about the policy white paper?
The policy white paper mostly for developers, so we don't have a long intro for basic concepts. So just write no dev into the concept. So the reason for organizing a white paper is because policy is so scattered around. People saying policy but means differently. So we want there's a place people can discuss and sort of standardize or unify. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? I know we're, go ahead.
Oh, just one more note. And so yeah, so the idea is that the overall security white paper would it would have a pointer for and then you go to this white paper to learn more.
Yeah, and any other questions? I know we're over time here, but everybody's been so nice and patient, had such smart questions that feel free to ask any more. If not, then join the security Slack channel. Ask questions there, talk with us individually, meet us in the hallway, come to our meetings on Wednesday at whatever time it is in your time zone. And thank you all for coming. Thanks.